The moment I stepped inside the ballroom, I knew I didn't belong there. Not by their standards. Lily's mother turned to me, smiling like a blade. "Oh, there's been a change. We've decided to keep it intimate. Family only." My son stood, 10 feet away. He heard her. He looked me in the eye and said nothing, so I walked out. Past the flowers I chose, the chairs I paid for, the vows I'd never hear. I gave him everything, even the floor beneath his vows. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time my son clung to my arm like it was the only solid thing in the world. His name is Alex, and for a long, long time, I was the only person he had. My husband died when Alex was 5. An aneurysm, they said. One minute he was in the kitchen dancing with a tea towel on his head, trying to make us laugh, and the next, he was gone. Alex didn't cry at the funeral. He sat on my lap, quiet as snow, while the grown-ups talked around us like we weren't even there. That night, he crawled into bed with me and whispered, "Don't go where Dad went." From that moment on, my life stopped being about me. I was 34 and a widow. I went back to work 3 weeks later. I taught 3rd grade during the day, graded papers at night, and packed lunches in between. Every single decision I made came down to one question. Will this help Alex? We didn't have much, but we had each other. Saturday mornings meant pancakes with too much syrup. Summers were library trips and homemade popsicles. I learned how to fix leaky faucets, how to remove gum from hair, and how to answer big questions. Like, do you think Dad can still see us? Sometimes I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering if I was enough. But every time Alex looked at me like I'd hung the moon, I believed, for a little while, that I was. He was a sweet boy, sensitive, thoughtful. The kind who made birthday cards with glitter glue and always saved me the last bite of his dessert. And as he grew, I let him. That's the part they never tell you about motherhood. It's a slow, constant act of letting go. I let him get his first job at the grocery store, even though I was terrified he'd be tired after school. I let him take his beat-up Honda 2 towns over to visit friends, though my heart pounded every time the phone didn't ring. I let him apply to colleges that were hours away, and when he chose the one closest to home, I cried, twice, once in relief, once in guilt, because I realized he stayed for me. When he graduated, I clapped louder than anyone else. When he got his first real job, I bought him a leather briefcase he never used, and when he told me he met someone, "Her name's Lily, Mom, you'd really like her," I smiled. Even though something in my gut went cold, she was polished, immaculate, the kind of girl who wore white even when it rained. I tried. I smiled. I complimented her shoes. I baked my famous lemon squares the first time she came over. She barely touched them, but love is blinding, and my son was lit up like Christmas morning. So I leaned in. I told myself that this was what mothers do. We adjust. We keep the peace. We disappear a little. What I didn't realize was, every small disappearance adds up. One day, you wake up, and you're no longer at the center of your child's world. You're not even on the map. I told myself it was just growing pains. That, families change. That I'd find my place in this new chapter. I held on. I gave more. I waited. I never imagined that the boy who once begged me never to leave him would be the one to turn his back. I thought I raised a boy who would remember where he came from. I didn't know he was learning how to leave me instead. The first time I met Lily's parents, I wore my navy blue church dress and brought a tin of homemade snickerdoodles. Her mother greeted me like I was a neighbor dropping off a casserole, polite, brief, and ready to close the door. "We've heard so much about you," she said, without meeting my eyes. They lived in a neighborhood where every house looked like a catalog page, stone facades, winding driveways, trimmed hedges that probably had names. I was seated at the far end of a long glass dining table. They served salad with tiny forks and corrected Lily's posture while she talked. Her father asked Alex about his career plans, how much he was saving, what his 5-year projection looked like. When Alex turned to me and mentioned that I'd co-signed his first apartment lease, Lily's mother tilted her head slightly, then smiled like I was a volunteer at a bake sale. That smile stayed with me. At first, I brushed it off. Rich people have different manners, I told myself. Doesn't mean they're unkind, just unfamiliar. But the pattern started to form quickly. When Lily and Alex got engaged, she called to tell me. Not him, her. We're thinking a spring wedding. We'll need a classic venue, nothing too rustic. Oh, and my parents have already hired a planner. I swallowed my feelings and said, "That sounds wonderful. Let me know how I can help." But I never got a call, not even when they toured venues. Not even when they sent out the save the dates, which, I should add, featured a photo of them holding hands on a white sand beach. No mention of family, no second photo. Just the two of them, airbrushed and glowing. I was reduced to updates delivered in passing. "Oh, we picked the dress last week. The tasting went great. Lily's mom is handling the guest list." Apparently, I wasn't involved. I was just expected to appear. But when I overheard Alex on the phone with his bank one evening, frustrated, pacing, I understood something he hadn't told me. They were struggling to pay for the venue. A week later, I requested a meeting with the event coordinator. I didn't tell Alex. I didn't tell Lily. I used what was left of my savings and refinanced my home for a small second mortgage. I did it all in silence. It wasn't about money. It was about showing up. About being part of something I was being, quietly erased from. The day I signed the check, I imagined Alex's face when he found out. Not shocked, just grateful. I thought maybe that moment would remind him who I was, what I still meant to him. I asked the coordinator to keep it private. For now, I wanted to tell Alex myself, on the morning of the wedding. Just us before the chaos. I even imagined tucking the receipt into a card with a note. "This is my way of standing beside you, even when you don't see me." But things kept changing, Dad. The bridal shower, Lily's mother stood up during a toast and said, "We're so proud to host this incredible day for our daughter and future son-in-law. Every detail has been touched by love, and a little bit of our checkbook." People laughed. Champagne clinked. I sat there, holding a small gift I'd wrapped in brown paper, suddenly feeling like a shadow at someone else's celebration. Later, Lily pulled me aside. "Oh, I meant to tell you, we made some seating changes for the ceremony, just to help balance things out." When I looked confused, she clarified. "We had to move you back a few rows, nothing personal, it's just optics." "Hope that's okay." She said it with that same glossy smile, like she was complimenting my shoes instead of removing me from the front row of my own son's wedding. Alex? He wasn't even at the shower, and when I called him that night to ask if he knew, his voice was distant. "It's just one day, Mom. Don't make it about you." That sentence rang like a bell in my ribs. Don't make it about you. I sat at my kitchen table long after the call ended, the receipt still folded in my drawer, wondering when exactly my role had become an inconvenience. But I still planned to go. I told myself that a mother's love is bigger than pride. That maybe, once it was all over, we'd find our way back to each other. So I pressed my dress. I wrote a simple card. I packed the receipt, still unshown, into my purse. And I got ready to smile through one more day of being politely ignored. I thought giving more would bring me closer. I didn't realize I was paying for my own disappearance. I arrived at the wedding venue an hour early. I wanted a quiet moment before the crowd filled the place, just to breathe it in, to admire what I'd built for him, even if no one else knew. The venue was beautiful, I'll admit that. Crystal chandeliers, white draping that reached the ceiling like silk waterfalls, rows of chairs dressed in ivory satin, a soft string quartet rehearsed in the distance. It was everything a mother dreams her child's wedding would be. I had my hands clasped in front of me when a young woman with a clipboard approached. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, squinting at her list. "The wedding party is requested to stay out of the ballroom until after the rehearsal photo session." "Oh, I'm not in the wedding party," I smiled. "I'm the groom's mother." She looked up, blinked, then looked down again at her clipboard. You're not listed under family access for this time slot. I'll need to ask you to wait outside." I felt the blood drain from my hands. No, that must be a mistake. I'm his mother. "I understand," she said, a bit softer now. "But I have to follow the instructions I've been given." My throat tightened, but I nodded. I didn't want to make a scene. Outside, I sat on a stone bench near the valet stand. It was spring, but the breeze cut through my dress like paper. I pulled my shawl tighter. I kept telling myself it was just an oversight, a scheduling slip, a miscommunication, until I saw Lily's parents arrive. The valet opened their door like royalty had arrived. Staff greeted them by name. The coordinator hugged Lily's mother and said, "Everything is exactly as you planned it." And that's when I knew. I hadn't just been forgotten. I'd been removed. During the ceremony, I was seated 6 rows back, next to a man I didn't recognize and a child who kicked the back of my seat the entire time. From that distance, I could barely see my son's face. But I heard his voice when he said, "I do." He sounded happy, and somehow that made it worse, because a small part of me had hoped he'd look for me. That he'd pause, scan the crowd, wonder why I wasn't closer. But he didn't. He kissed his bride, raised their entwined hands, and walked back up the aisle without a single glance in my direction. At the reception, things got worse. I found my name scribbled on a place card at the edge of a table near the restrooms. No centerpiece, no table gift, just a folded napkin and a seat with a broken leg. While guests clinked champagne flutes and danced under twinkle lights, I sat with strangers, one of whom asked if I was the woman from catering. I laughed softly. "No, I'm the groom's mother." "Oh," she said. "I just assumed—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Later that night, I made my way over to Alex. He was standing with a group of Lily's relatives, beaming. I waited until he caught my eye. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, stepping closer. "I just wanted to say how beautiful everything was." He nodded. "Thanks, Mom. Everything turned out perfect." I waited for him to hug me, to thank me, to say I missed you at the front. But instead, he turned back to his in-laws and laughed at something I didn't hear. That's when Lily's mother came up beside me and whispered, "I hope you didn't mind the changes. We just wanted everything to feel elevated." "Changes?" I asked. "Well, the seating, the guest list. We wanted to be sure everything aligned with our vision. I'm sure you understand." I stared at her, my voice low and calm. "Your vision," she smiled. "And isn't it lovely?" I don't remember walking away. I just remember standing in the hallway, between the ballroom and the back entrance, holding onto my purse like it was an anchor. Inside it, the receipt still sat. Crisp, folded, untouched. Proof that I had built the foundation for a moment I wasn't welcome in. I could have gone back in, could have demanded recognition, could have told everyone that I paid for this. But instead, I slipped out the side door. No one saw me leave. No one called after me. And that night, I sat in my car with the engine running, headlights off, watching my own son dance under a chandelier I paid for. I waited for the tears, for the anger, for something big. But it didn't come. Just a hollow kind of quiet, like a door closing. I dressed with grace. I showed up on time. I sat where I was told. And still, they erased me. The morning after the wedding, I woke before sunrise. I hadn't slept. My body had gone through the motions of resting, pajamas, tea, bed, but my mind had kept spinning, looping back through everything I should have said and didn't. I walked barefoot into the kitchen and made coffee like I'd done every morning. For 30 years, same chipped mug, same bitter first sip, but nothing felt the same. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears until it becomes a sound of its own. I sat at the table and opened the small wooden box where I keep old photos, the ones I hadn't looked at in years. The first was of Alex on his 5th birthday. Missing front teeth, frosting on his chin, arms around my neck like he never planned to let go. Next came the one from his 8th grade science fair, him holding up a wonky solar system model, me clapping like he'd won a Nobel Prize. And then, my favorite, a Polaroid from a snowy night in December. He was 11. We'd built a crooked snowman, and I wrapped my scarf around its neck. Alex had insisted on taking a photo, so Dad can see it. That night, he said something I've never forgotten. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of you when I grow up. You won't ever be lonely." I think part of me held on to that promise like a second heartbeat. The day of the wedding, before everything fell apart, I'd arrived early on purpose. I wanted a moment alone inside the venue I'd paid for. To take it in, not for the grandeur or the guests, but for the small, selfish satisfaction of knowing I had made this happen. Before anyone else arrived, I wandered into the ballroom. It smelled of roses and fresh linens. The chandeliers sparkled like they'd been lit just for me. And for a moment, I imagined what it would have felt like to walk down that aisle, not as a bride, not even as a guest of honor, but simply as a mother. Acknowledged. I stood there in the aisle, hands folded, heart full, rehearsing the words I'd planned to say to Alex. "Darling, I know things have been busy, but I wanted you to know this was my gift, quietly, from me to you." I pictured his face lighting up, the same way it used to when I'd show up at his school recitals or bring him a warm lunch on cold days. But that moment never came. Instead, I was escorted out, not gently, not rudely, just formally. "Sorry, ma'am, this area's reserved." No, one argued for me. No one checked the list. My son didn't rush in to say, "That's my mother," so I waited in the parking lot. For an hour, and in that still, aching silence, I started to understand something that had been creeping in for months. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being replaced by a shinier version of motherhood, a mother-in-law with a country club, membership, and a last name that carried weight. I wasn't part of the narrative anymore. I was a footnote in someone else's chapter. When I finally got home that night, the first thing I did was kick off my shoes. My feet ached from standing. My chest ached from pretending. I went into Alex's old room. It hasn't changed much. Same posters, same desk. Even the small broken lamp he refused to let me throw away. I sat on his bed and looked around, trying to find traces of the boy I raised. And then I saw it, tucked in the corner of the bookshelf, the jar. When Alex was 10, he made a mom jar. Every time I helped him with something hard, math, nightmares, scraped knees, he'd write me a note and put it in that jar. "I love how you always wait for me after school. Thank you for letting me cry when Dad died. Best grilled cheese ever." I opened the jar. The slips were yellowed and curling at the edges. Some were faded, but they were real. Evidence that once I was his whole world. I clutched them to my chest and cried. Not the kind of tears that pour out in floods. No wailing, no collapse, just steady, quiet, exhausted grief. The kind of crying that feels like it comes from your bones. Because it's not just about being forgotten. It's about realizing you no longer have a place at the table you helped build. And the worst part? Knowing you funded the feast. Have you ever done something big for someone who later forgot you completely? Tell me your story below. I could have screamed. Instead, I walked. Every step away from that venue echoed louder than the vows inside. Grief comes in waves, but so does grace. The Monday after the wedding, I went back to my life, my real life, the one without chandeliers or guest lists or seating charts. The school where I teach had just come back from spring break. My third graders were rowdy, full of stories about beaches and sleepovers. I kept my smile wide and my voice steady, but my mind was still half floating in a ballroom I was never truly invited into. By midweek, I found a pink envelope on my desk. No name, just stickers of suns and smiley faces along the edges. Inside was a handmade card, construction paper folded in half with the words, "Thank you for showing up for me," written in purple marker. Below it, in a child's handwriting, "You always notice when I'm sad. I hope you don't feel invisible like me sometimes." It was signed, Lila, age 8. I sat there staring at the card for a long time. It was such a small thing, so innocent, yet it landed like a truth I hadn't been ready to see. I wasn't invisible, not to everyone. Just to the one person I thought would always see me. That afternoon, I stayed late after school. I erased the whiteboard more carefully than usual, straightened each desk, refilled the pencil cups. I needed something orderly, something that made sense. Later that night, I opened my journal for the first time in years. The last entry was dated the week after Alex graduated college. Back then, I had written, "He's becoming someone new. I hope I can still find my place in his life." This time, I wrote something simpler. "I am still me, even if he doesn't see me." Writing helped. I didn't realize how much I'd been swallowing down, how many moments I'd let slide just to keep the peace. For years, I'd tried to earn love with service, thinking quiet sacrifice was the same as devotion, that if I just kept giving, he'd remember. But love shouldn't be a transaction. It's not a tab you keep adding to, hoping someday someone pays you back. The next week, I met my friend Clara for coffee. She's one of those women who can see through you with a glance. As soon as I walked in, she said, "You've got that tight smile again. What happened?" I told her everything. Slowly, she didn't interrupt, didn't offer cliches or quick fixes. She just listened. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "Silence can be power too. You didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't try to claw your way into something that didn't want to hold you. That's strength." I hadn't thought of it that way. I'd felt weak, rejected, discarded. But maybe dignity looks like walking away when you know you've done your part. Maybe motherhood, the kind no one claps for, is knowing when to stop chasing someone who's not ready to look back. Later that week, I walked through my garden, the one I'd neglected for weeks. Weeds had crept up between the rows, and the soil was dry, cracked. I knelt down and started pulling weeds, loosening the hardened ground with my hands. The earth didn't care who ignored me. It welcomed me back just the same. I planted new seeds, zinnias, cucumbers, morning glories, the kind of things that take time to bloom, the kind that require patience and faith. That weekend, I saw a mother walking with her young son down the sidewalk. He was maybe 6, holding her hand, babbling on about something in his backpack. She was only half listening, but she smiled every time he paused. I watched them until they turned the corner, and it hit me. I had my time. I had my chapter. It was full of peanut butter sandwiches, school concerts, and tiny fists gripping mine. Just because the story changed didn't mean it wasn't worth telling. I didn't stop loving my son, but I stopped waiting for the version of him who used to need me. I stopped needing to be needed. And in that stillness, something strange happened. I started feeling whole again. When I stopped waiting for an apology, I made space for peace instead. It started with a voicemail. 3 months after the wedding, I hadn't heard from Alex in all that time, not a call, not a text, not even a forwarded email from some insurance company with my name misspelled. Then suddenly, a message. Hey, Mom. I was wondering if we could talk. Things have been hectic. Maybe I could come by this weekend? His voice was stiff, polite, but not warm. I listened to it twice, trying to decipher the spaces between his words. I didn't call back right away. Not out of bitterness, but because, for the first time, I wasn't going to be the one chasing the conversation. That Saturday, he showed up just after 4 p.m. His car was cleaner than I remembered. He wore a button-down shirt that looked like it hadn't seen a wrinkle in its life. "Hi," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway like a stranger. I led him into the kitchen, poured him coffee, sat across from him at the table where I used, to help him with homework and patch up scraped knees. We made small talk for a while. How work was going, what the weather had been like, how married life was treating him. He didn't say much, just kept stirring his coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. Then finally, he looked up. "I hate to even ask, Mom, but we've hit a few bumps financially. Some wedding stuff ran over budget, and Lily left her job to take care of things. At home. Things are tight." There it was, the ask. I waited. Quiet. "I was wondering if you could maybe help with a few payments, just until we figure things out. You've always said I could come to you if I needed to." I studied his face. The one I knew by heart. The face I once cupped in my hands when he had the flu and swore I'd never let anything bad happen to him. Reached into my purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He looked confused. "What's this?" I slid it across the table. He opened it. Inside was the full payment receipt for the wedding venue, with my name on the contract, my signature, my bank. Beneath that, the second mortgage paperwork, the payment schedule, the interest rate. His hand stilled. He didn't say anything for a long time, then, almost too quietly, "You paid for it?" I nodded. He looked back down at the papers like they were written in a language he didn't understand. "But Lily's?" "Parents said they took the credit," I said gently. "I let them." "Why didn't you tell me?" I swallowed. "I wanted to. I planned to. But then the guest list changed. The seating changed. You changed." He looked ashamed. And I saw, for the first time in years, that little boy again. The one who used to squeeze my hand until my fingers turned purple. He leaned back, exhaled. "I didn't know." "I know." He started to speak, then stopped. I watched him search for something that would make it right. But there wasn't anything. And for once, I didn't feel the need to soften the moment. "You didn't see me," I said quietly. "Not just at the wedding. Before that. You stopped calling. You let them decide how close I could stand to you." He winced. "I thought you were okay with it. That's the thing about mothers, Alex. We let a lot slide so you don't have to feel guilty. But don't confuse silence for consent." His eyes welled. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." There was a long silence between us, not tense, just honest. He left an hour later, said he needed to think about everything, and I let him go. No guilt trip, no tug on his sleeve. No hopeful promises, just the truth sitting on the kitchen table, heavier than the envelope that carried it. A week later, I heard from Clara again. "Did you see the social post?" she asked. I hadn't. She sent it. A smiling photo of Lily and Alex with the caption, "Marriage is about learning what truly matters. Rebuilding takes time, but we're learning." Something in that caption didn't sit right. Over the next few weeks, I began to hear small things, from neighbors, from mutual friends, whispers about control, about Lily slowly isolating Alex from old friends, about tension in their new condo. 1. Neighbor mentioned that Lily had been calling her parents daily in tears. Another said Alex had asked about temp agencies. The image was unraveling. I said nothing. Didn't reach out, didn't offer comfort, because it wasn't mine to fix anymore. He looked at the numbers like they were lies. But truth has a way of sitting real heavy in a man's hands. It was mid-July when he came back. No warning this time. No voicemail. Just the soft knock of knuckles on my front door as the sun was beginning to dip behind the trees. I opened it, and there he was, my son. But not the polished, poised version from the wedding. This was the boy I once knew, buried beneath wrinkled clothes, tired eyes, and the kind of silence that speaks louder than any apology. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like the house itself might reject him. He looked around at the familiar walls, the bookshelf still tilted slightly to one side, the quilt I'd made years ago draped over the couch. He sat down without waiting to be invited. His shoulders sagged under the weight of something heavier than just embarrassment. "She left," he said after a pause. "Lily, about a week ago, packed up and moved back in with her parents. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to." He stared at the floor, twisting the ring on his finger until it slipped off and rolled across the coffee table. "I think," he began, "I think I let her talk me into a version of life that didn't really fit me. Or you. Or anything that made sense. Still." I said nothing. I let the quiet hold the space open for whatever he needed to say next. "I thought distance was maturity," he said. "I thought keeping you out of it meant I was finally my own man." He looked up, tears brimming. "But all I did was abandon the one person who never left me." I took a breath, measured and slow. "You didn't just leave me out of the wedding?" "Alex," I said softly. "You let someone else decide who I was allowed to be in your life, and then you treated me like I agreed with it." "I know," he whispered. "I see it now. All of it. Too late, I guess." "Not too late," I said. "But not the same." He nodded, accepting the weight of that boundary. There was a time I would have tried to comfort him, to soften the edges, to say, "It's okay," just so we could move forward. But not anymore. Growth isn't always about reaching out. Sometimes, it's about knowing where to stop. He wiped his face with his sleeve and looked around the room again. "Do you think we can fix this?" he asked. I leaned back, folded my hands in my lap. "Fix? No. You can't fix something that was never broken, you just stopped seeing it." He blinked, absorbing that. "But we can start again," I added, "from where we are, not where we were. No guilt, no pretending." A long silence stretched between us. He nodded, slow and heavy, like each movement carried years of regret. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a check. "I know it doesn't cover everything," he said, "but I'll pay you back for the venue, every cent." I didn't take it. I just looked him in the eye and said, "This isn't about money, but I'll accept it, because you need to feel what it means to take responsibility." He placed the envelope on the coffee table. It looked almost out of place in this house, this quiet, worn-in space filled with things that mattered far more than paper. We sat for a while longer. No small talk, no tidy ending. He stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. "Do you think Dad would have been disappointed in me?" The question hung in the air. I let it sit there for a moment. "No," I said finally. "But he would have been proud you came back." He gave a small, grateful nod, and then, almost in a whisper, "Thank you, Mom, for everything, even when I didn't see it." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't forgive him, but because he needed to feel the silence of a woman who had nothing left to prove. He left a boy with expectations. He returned a man looking for grace.